and welcome to this week's episode here at That Shakespeare Life. I'm Cassidy Cash, and this week I'm going to show you 6 real-life castles that you can actually visit, assuming all of the COVID restrictions have been lifted by the time you see this. There are 6 real-life castles that you can visit that are mentioned in Shakespeare's plays, and today I'm going to count them down for you. Number 1 is Stirling Castle. The plays of Macbeth and A Midsummer Night's Dream both nod to Stirling Castle. Macbeth was written intentionally to impress James I, and I'll argue that it's due in no small part to Shakespeare needing to impress upon the monarch his undying loyalty after being named as an adjacent contributor to the gunpowder plot. Oh dear me. As James I was baptized at Stirling Castle and was descended from the Canmore line, which eventually overthrows Macbeth in the end. Sorry, spoilers. Stirling Castle is tangentially related to Shakespeare's Macbeth. A more direct association with this castle from Shakespeare is A Midsummer Night's Dream, in which the idea of a baptism at Stirling Castle plays a running joke throughout this play. There is one famous historical report about the baptism of Prince Henry, which was published in London as a way to advertise the king's credentials of James VI. The account lists several events that were planned for the baptism, though not all of them were actually performed for a variety of mitigating circumstances. Perhaps the most humorous event, and one reason it makes such good fodder for a play like A Midsummer Night's Dream, is the pulling of a chariot by a lion and having it come into the Great Hall. This idea was tossed in the end for fear it might scare people. There's an idea. A real lion I am talking about here. James I of England being keen on wild animals, housing what amounted to a zoo in the Tower of London during his reign, including elephants, lions, and polar bears, Shakespeare undoubtedly seized upon the opportunity to include a reference to the lion's chariot as a nod to James specifically. Along with the quote from Act 3 of A Midsummer Night's Dream when Iachimo says, "Will not the ladies be afeard of the lion?" The lion appears as a joke in all 5 acts of this particular Shakespeare play. The second castle on our list is Cronborg Castle. Cronborg Castle is one of my favorites. It's Hamlet's home. Cronborg Castle is the actual castle in Denmark that Shakespeare used as an inspiration for his play Hamlet. While the bard never visited the castle himself that we know of, he did meet 2 of Denmark's nobility, Frederick Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and I'm gonna say that Guildenstern's first name is pronounced Nude, but it's K-N-U-D, and you can decide for yourself how to say that properly. But when they visited London in the 1590s, Shakespeare would have known they were there. The play Hamlet would be first performed soon thereafter in 1601. Thought to have been based on a legendary Danish prince named Amled, the play's hero shares the same home at Cronborg. Shakespeare worked his playwriting magic on the name of the castle, as you may remember that in the play itself, Hamlet's home is actually called Elsinore. Elsinore is the real name of the city where Cronborg Castle is located in Denmark. Many well-known Shakespearean actors have come to Cronborg Castle to perform Hamlet. It is what's perhaps the ultimate Hamlet destination for you true Hamlet files out there. Every year, the castle even hosts a Hamlet celebration where you can learn about the history of the play and the castle to see the play itself performed inside the very castle where it inspired the play. Number 3 is Kenilworth Castle. Kenilworth Castle is so romantic, and my friend Philippa Brule at British History Tours takes what is perhaps the best trip to Kenilworth Castle, so make sure you look at her page for all of her trips to go there. But if you're just visiting, here's a few Shakespeare things that you would want to know. Act 4, Scene 9 of Henry VI, Part 2 takes place at Kenilworth Castle, as stated in the stage directions of Shakespeare's play about England's history. This scene is where King Henry discovered Cade has fled, his army has disappeared, and that York is coming to get him. Oh no! You can visit Kenilworth Castle today and revel in the mighty Shakespeare history there represented. Kenilworth Castle is also the site where Robert Dudley tried to woo Queen Elizabeth into marrying him by staging a massive festival that included a play which some historians think a young 11-year-old William Shakespeare may have even witnessed himself. When you visit, stand in the Great Hall and try to imagine what it would have been like to see a grand play performed before the Queen on a scale never seen before. You can also climb up the very tower built by Dudley to woo Elizabeth, but don't forget to recite King Henry's lines from Act 4, which says, "Come, wife, let's in and learn to govern better, for yet may England's curse my wretched reign." You can see why I'm a historian and not an actor. Number 4 is Inverness Castle. Allegedly, when asked about the connection of Shakespeare, Macbeth, and Cawdor, the 5th Earl of Cawdor exclaimed, "I wish the bard had never written this darned play." And he didn't say darned, but we're going to because my kids are in the next room. When researching the historical sites connected to Shakespeare's play Macbeth, there are actually 2 castles worthy of mention and places you can actually visit today, the both of them. The first is the most famous one, and that's Cawdor Castle. This is some controversy around the idea of Cawdor Castle's connection to Macbeth. On the one hand, Macbeth is the Thane of Cawdor, but historians are quick to point out that the play is a highly fictionalized version of the actual Scottish historical figure of Macbeth. And as it turns out, King Macbeth is not a whole lot like the fictional Macbeth that Shakespeare wrote about. Additionally, the castle never actually features in the play itself, which brings us to the more direct castle reference associated with Shakespeare's Macbeth, and that's Inverness Castle. Shakespeare's Macbeth features King Duncan being killed at the castle at Inverness. In the play, Duncan declares, quote, "This castle hath a pleasant seat. The air nimbly and sweetly recommends itself unto our gentle senses." That comes from Act 1, Scene 6. He is talking about the castle at Inverness. Inverness Castle is also where Macbeth descends into madness. For Shakespeare, Inverness Castle was especially rich with analogy and connection for his audience of James I, because in 1548, Inverness Castle was sieged and taken over by 2 Scottish clans, the Clan Munro and the Clan Fraser. Outlander, anyone? They supported Mary, Queen of Scots, who had arrived there after fleeing to England only to find the gates of England shut against her. Nope, you can't come here. That whole wanting to kill the queen thing, they really weren't receptive. So the clans felt that she was badly treated and took the castle over on her behalf. She had the governor who had refused her entry hanged and was thereafter treated very favorably. That happens when you hang people. The chief of Clan Munro was later given special favor by her son, James VI. The 5th castle on our list of, yes, 6, so we're almost there, hang with me, is Pontiff Castle. Pontiff Castle is great fun because we interviewed Neil Redfern on That Shakespeare Life recently about the historical excavations that are going on there of the gatehouse at Pontiff Castle. This castle is now presently in ruins, but you can visit the ruins and you can still walk through some of the dungeons. Known as the most important and most terrifyingly notorious castle in all of English history, certainly in all of early modern England, Pontefract Castle would be immortalized by Shakespeare in his play Richard III. The setting for Richard II and Richard III, it is in Richard III that the king is dragged from Pontefract Castle, imprisoned in the dungeon, and killed, that we find the famous lines most remembered about Pontefract Castle when Rivers declares, "O Pomfrey, Pomfrey, O thou bloody prison! Fatal and ominous to noble peers, within the guilty closure of thy walls, Richard II was here hacked to death." And he was. Charming, right? Pontefract Castle was a huge and magnificent castle in its heyday. Known for having a bloody prison reputation, the castle was made up of a large network of dungeons. Prisoners who were kept there could get lost in the massive maze of tunnels, and they would scrape their names into the stone walls, and you can still see them when you visit there today. Pontefract Castle was the site where Richard III condemned Richard Grey, Thomas Vaughan, and the same Earl Rivers who spoke those famous lines about Pontefract in Shakespeare's play to death for endangering his reign. The same year they were executed was the year of the alleged murder of the 2 young princes in the Tower of London. And I will leave you to fight about that. Don't comment to me about the Tower and the princes. While King Richard II was definitely imprisoned at Pontefract in 1399, historians argue over his exact death. While some think he died of starvation, either self-inflicted or intentional neglect, others believe he was cruelly murdered in the dungeons. Perhaps when you visit, you can scan the walls to see if he left any clues scrawled into the stone. Our last castle on this list of castles is castle number 6, Baynard Castle, also known as the Tower of London. Scene 7 of Shakespeare's Richard III takes place at Baynard's Castle. Likely visible from the globe in the 17th century, Baynard's Castle was on the Thames River. After a fire in 1428, Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, reclaimed it and rebuilt the castle. After he died, the building was given to Henry VI, who gave it to Richard, Duke of York. It seems a lot of people were passing this castle around in general. All of these characters play roles in Shakespeare's history plays, making Baynard's Castle a significant location to tie into for the bard for his plays. In 1452, the Duke of York was placed under house arrest at Baynard's Castle, and his agreement to never again rebel against the king was the reason he was allowed to be under house arrest and not beheaded. Guess it pays to keep your promises. Richard, Duke of Gloucester, met the Duke of Buckingham here and presented a petition, the episode of which Shakespeare immortalizes in his play Richard III, when the Duke of Buckingham declares, "I salute you with this royal title. Long live kind Richard, England's worthy king." Once Richard III died in 1485, the castle then belonged to Henry Tudor. The castle itself would burn down along with the Globe Theatre in the fire of 1666. During Elizabeth I's reign, the castle belonged to the Earl of Pembroke, who entertained the Queen at dinner and fireworks display. Housed there, it would be a descendant of the Earl of Pembroke, which would write a dedication to Shakespeare in Shakespeare's first folio. While the original castle is no longer available to visit, and I did promise that the ones on this list would be places you could go and see, if you're wondering about that, one reason I included it on this list of castles is that the site where the castle used to sit can be seen and is worth the visit if you know how to find it. There is a placard marking Baynard's Castle in London, as well as the Castle Baynard Street, to help you locate the exact spot where this historical monument once stood. That's it for this week. I'm Cassidy Cash. Thank you for joining me on this trip into castles from Shakespeare. I hope you learned something new about the Bard. You can find a full list of these castles down in the show notes below this video, and I will link you over to my friend Philippa's tours. They are resuming a whole bunch of really excellent tours that will visit some of these sites, though not all of them, next year in 2021, and I'll make sure to put some links where you can learn more about each of them as well, so make sure you join me there. Make sure you like and subscribe. We'll be back next Saturday with even more Shakespeare, and don't forget to follow us on the podcast. There's new episodes every Monday of That Shakespeare Life, available on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and we are syndicated on the Tudor Radio Network. So you can pick us up wherever you get your podcasts. That's it for this week. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.